Hello there. It is 5:47 p.m. on Monday, the 2nd of March, and I am on I'm off of some kind of a nature trail in this community park area that seems pretty safe and secure. I was just hearing some bangs, some loud bangs that sounded like guns, but I don't know, it sounded pretty rhythmic and not necessarily frantic. I mean, I did have sort of a, what do they call that? Active shooter fear for a moment, but it just sounded a little bit too, what do you call it? I guess, yeah, just calm and collective. But yeah, I found this nice little spot. The sun is still out, and it probably will be for another 30 or 45 minutes or so, but I'm happy to be here. It's a good enough spot, I feel pretty confident about it. I was initially going to stay within this park, but after doing a little bit of a walk around, I was like, man, there is a lot of traffic going on around here, and I don't want to be in these people's way, and I certainly don't want them to be in my way. So I had noticed this little nature trail sign as soon as I came into the park, and I was like, well, I should at least go investigate that, because if nothing else, that sounds like a lot better of a choice for like what I'm actually looking to do. And speaking of things looking better, my feet have certainly looked better in the past. The shoes that I'm wearing, I think, would be perfectly well and good if I was actually on a trail, but I think having never really walked in them for any significant distance, and especially starting on pavement, let's just say I got my money's worth today. I got some nice blisters going on, not even really blisters, I guess, because they've already popped, just some abrasions, And it's funny too, because like I can feel my feet as I walk, obviously. But just I'm reminded of like the drawing of the homunculus, that kind of shows like where it's a proportional rendering of what your perception feels like if the areas of your body were increased in size to show additional sensitivity. That was hard to say. So for instance, your lips are really big, your eyes are really big, your hands are really big, maybe your genitals are really big, so on and so forth. And it's just funny because like in my mind, the way that my feet feel while I'm walking is like so much worse than the way they actually look, which is always so gratifying. At the end of the day, I'm like, man, thank God that my feet don't actually look how they feel, And I will say too, I've been looking forward to this road walk portion of the trip because I've just felt like it's sort of like a necessary penance, Like, of course, I could very easily have gotten a ride from numerous people to get to the trail, and that would have been all well and good, but I guess I should say, like, one of the things that I did while I was living with my parents was participated in a trail maintenance club. I don't really think I found out about the club until like the beginning of February, so I really didn't spend a lot of time there, but I went 4 or 5 times, I can't recall which. It's one of the two. And one of the jobs I had while I was doing that work was cleaning out a privy on the Appalachian Trail, which, boy, if you want to talk about like earning your keep, that was something that was very unique and very, very, well, it really wasn't as disgusting as you might think, but for me it goes beyond a level of like disgust per se, because the thing that really gets my goat about the situation is really just fear of virulency, like the idea that I could get sick from doing that kind of work. I think I'm pretty much out of the crosshairs of any kind of possible illness that I could have contracted during that. But yeah, it was something that stuck with me for a long time, like at least 48 hours after finishing the job, And my sister was visiting at the time, and I really thought it would be fun to take her with me, because, I mean, obviously, like, it's pretty much the worst thing you can imagine doing as, like, a person who's maintaining a trail. Like, there are a few things I can think of that would be less pleasant than that. there were certainly things. I mean, most of trail maintenance is like generally unpleasant because it's just so much manual labor. You have to hike up to areas to even begin work. And an interesting distinction, at least in certain parts of the Appalachian Trail that I worked in, was that in areas of the national forest, you're not actually allowed to use power tools. So not only would we have to hike to some of the areas where we would do work, but we'd have to carry manual tools with us, and we're not able to use anything that was like efficient, powered, or like petroleum based or whatever. So that was interesting. But yeah, I did have a strong sense while doing the trail maintenance with the Privy. I was like, well, this is a test. It's like, do I love the Appalachian Trail enough to clean a Privy? And I was like, the answer is yes. And the interesting thing about that is like, I had listened to this episode of Neil deGrasse Tyson's Star Talk, shortly, I guess, after doing the Privy work. And I can't remember the name of the guest, but he was like some AI godfather or something like that. And he was talking about how regrettable it is that, like, in general, philosophy doesn't stand up to the rigors of scientific experimentation, And I was just thinking that it was an interesting instance for me to be able to actually test my devotion and love for something like what I'm doing right now, because I was like literally doing the worst possible job. And even beyond that specifically, it made me think a lot about the Tao Te Ching, because it's basically the lowest job on the totem pole, cleaning a Privy. And the Tao is often characterized as having similar qualities to water. And one of those similar qualities is that water will find the lowest place and the lowest path, or the path of least resistance, rather. And so it nourishes everything, but it doesn't boast, and it also will spend time in areas that men disdain. And so it's just an interesting thing to be able to actually, put some portion of my own personal philosophy to the test. And beyond that, I felt like a lot of today was also me putting, my devotion and sincerity to the test, because, I certainly, I knew that I was entering this whole thing like undertrained, like I knew that it was going to be painful in a lot of ways that I couldn't predict, because it was just like, well, you throw a soft body into like a really like repetitive and rigorous situation, like there's going to be some friction, literally, and figuratively. And it's crazy how much rougher this is on your body than cycling. Like I just can't really get over it at this point, because biking, when I went cross country back in August, like I just jumped on my bike and it was basically just as easy as it ever was. It's like there's no, I remember having some pain in my hands just because like I was standing up for more of the day than usual, because I stand a lot while I bike, and putting pressure on the palms of my hands was causing some calluses. And I was also dealing with like some sore elbows for the same reason, I think, just like an additional period of time where the actual weight of my body is like resting on an area that isn't necessarily used to that much weight for that amount of time. But walking it's so deceptively simple. You think, you throw on your backpack and like you just start going, but then just these little things like start to emerge, little pain points, my feet. Those have been the things that I have been battling with the most so far. My hips are also really sore. My left calf muscle feels really, really tight. And I guess that's about it. So, all things considered, not that bad. But definitely a reminder of kind of what happened when I first started hiking the Appalachian Trail back in 2022, which was actually the Pinhoti was the real trial by fire at that point. I remember within the first week, I think, I had gotten to Chiaha State Park. I think that's right. I can't really remember, but yeah, like, I don't know, 5 days in or something like that. Like, I basically got to a point where I had been doing some pretty big days, like 20 plus mile days, and today was actually a pretty big day, all things considered, which, I had to do a little bit of backtracking this evening to find this spot. But yeah, I think I did 21 and a half miles today or something like that. I feel reasonably comfortable with doing about 20 miles a day, and I think my feet will only toughen up over time, obviously. I've been here before. I've experienced this before. It was a little foolish for me to jump into this with shoes that I didn't really have any experience with, and also that were relatively new. But I have faith and confidence and a certain type of like tape to put over the abrasive marks and everything. And I've got my feet breathing now, which is nice. And yeah, I again feel like this is like, it's a certain type of gesture and like sacrifice, I suppose, to the trail. Because like I mentioned, I could have just started like right at Amicalola, but I just feel like walking from my parents' house, there's some sort of like figurative, metaphorical embodiment of the task that I like about like again, I think one of the things I'm finding about myself is that I don't like discrete definitions of things that are one thing and not another. And I guess to be specific about what that means in this case, it's like, I don't necessarily prefer nature all the time. I don't necessarily prefer civilization, as I was mentioning last night. And so for me, it's like, well, the thing that I actually enjoy doing is moving through space. And it just so happens that historically the Appalachian Trail has been a venue where I can move through space consistently and not be thought of as crazy, and biking is similar, but hiking and camping is just so different. And this to me just feels like a transition phase between the two, because I'm still camping in these spots that are like not necessarily allowed, which I'm definitely excited to not do that anymore, just because it's an added stress that is just like so unnecessary. I would rather be in my tent and worried about like snapping twigs and the sound of like heavy footprints or breathing like from an animal or something like that, than to be kind of where I am right now. Like, this isn't bad, and I found a good spot that I'm, again, pretty confident in. But by and large, like, it's going to be a very different experience to finally be allowed to be camping somewhere. It's been a long time since I have experienced that, And so I'm looking forward to it because, I don't know, it's just a nice stress to take out of the whole experience. Like, I've kind of planned the rest of what I will be going through in order to get to Amicalola, which, according to my calculations, will be on the end of day Wednesday, which is kind of cool because there's actually a shelter at Amicalola. So I think I only have to sleep one more time in an area that is not technically sanctioned for any kind of camping like this. And again, I'm not complaining, just noting the difference there between, like, I guess, sanctioned camping versus not sanctioned camping. I did basically, I don't know how much non-sanctioned camping I did when I was on the bike ride most recently, but obviously the vast majority, like at least 80% of the nights that I spent out there were in places that I wasn't technically allowed to be. I've tried to always be like conscientious of like the places that I choose, and also the plausible deniability that surrounds those places until I commit to actually sleeping. Like, even now, like, I'm in this little path. I'll take a picture of it. I've always fantasized about having like a coffee table book of all of the places that I have camped on a given adventure. But historically, something usually happens and I get off of like the schedule of taking the pictures of the places that I have slept, and then once I miss one, I kind of am just like, well, the whole project's ruined, which is probably about as close as I get to perfectionism. Bacchus is with me, y'all. All praise Bacchus. But yeah, I kind of forgot what I was talking about. But it was a persistent thought throughout the day. I was just like, I just think that it's interesting, just the fact that, like, I'm out here alone. I did have the thought, I was like, it's not impossible that I'm the only person who has ever walked from Clayton to Amicalola. Like, it certainly seems unlikely that that would be true, but it's certainly not impossible. And so it's interesting to think that this distance has never been traversed by a person with this specific intention of going from, Clayton to Amicalola. And so to that degree, it feels a little bit special to be doing it. But then also it's surprisingly difficult. I think if I had known, which I couldn't have, at the beginning, that road walking was going to tear up my feet as badly as it has, which is actually not that bad. I do feel particularly lucky that it's I don't know, survivable. Again, that homunculus view of my feet is not actually the case of, the feelings don't match the reality, which for human beings I'd say is par for the course. But yeah, I don't know. I wish that there was a greater way to describe the sense that I have, or at least that I was having. I took a couple of breaks today. I guess the chronology will be coming up next, but I did feel inspired when I sat down. I was like, there was one specific feeling, which is what I'm about to talk about, that I felt like was just important to kind of meditate on and discuss with myself, because I kind of feel like the pain and the adjustment that I'm going through right now, which anyone on any kind of thru hike would be going through, but it's, for me, the venue also adds a different kind of texture to the experience, because, again, perhaps unlikely though it may be, I may be the only one who have ever done this. And that part of this suffering is like even more voluntary because it's so unnecessary, but again, I feel like the word penance keeps coming to mind. Like it's a certain type of a blood sacrifice, to show intentionality. And, I took one break at a certain point today at a gas station, which was sort of like my unofficial last resupply point for the evening. When I got back onto the road, I've taken a couple of breaks today that were definitely nice. And again, I'm pretty satisfied with the idea that I've done 21 miles and it's not even dark yet. Like yesterday was a little bit rough in terms of just like finishing after dark. Like I don't prefer to do that just because setting up at night is just not as easy. And, this is supposed to be vacation to a certain degree, even if there is an element of spiritual and intellectual, emotional expansion that is also sort of on the back burner. But yeah, man, I regret to say, oh yeah, setting up at night and stuff. Yeah, and shout out to my parents as per usual, and specifically to my mom. Unfortunately, Mom, I'll go ahead and tell you since we haven't talked about it directly. Apparently, my mom she very thoughtfully and sneakily added a little like printout of some words of encouragement to my sleeping pad. It was like an accordion style foam pad, and she had stuffed that little piece of paper in there. And I think last night when I was setting everything up in the dark, I always like shake out my pad and everything like that so that I don't bring any sand or debris into my tent. And I think I just shook it out, and I couldn't see it, that I had this piece of paper that I then lost. And I do have a firm memory of seeing a piece of paper on the ground this morning, but I just thought it was trash that the people who had the chairs at the campsite that I was at had left, so I didn't investigate. So apologies, Mom, but thank you. They say about the roads of hell are paved with good intentions. I need to kind of adjust my seating a little bit. My feet are falling asleep because I have too much pressure on my bum. That's good. Yeah, that sweet soreness. I do remember this feeling so much and so well from every hike that I've ever done. It's just like every time you move your legs, like you engage and release like a certain number of muscles, and it's a tension and a relaxation, when you're moving your legs and everything like that. And so as you kind of maneuver around, certain things feel better, certain things feel worse. But it goes beyond any kind of gym soreness I've ever felt, for sure. And I haven't spent a lot of time at gyms. I've actually had a pretty long conversation with a friend recently about how much I dislike modern gyms, just because it's just, to me, the idea of doing exercise in a room, and, no shade thrown on those who do. I have a lot of important people in my life who depend on gyms for fitness, and I applaud that. But for me personally, an important part of either biking or walking has always been just encountering whatever the weather is doing at that moment, and kind of just managing to find a way to be okay with it and to kind of move with it and not against it. But yes, let me go ahead and just change up a few things real quick so I can be more comfortable. Just a moment. This is harder than I thought it would be. Oh, okay. That is much, much better. Okay. So yeah, in any case, I don't even know where I was going with that. It's been a long day, but I'm not so worse for wear, which is good. And I've already said it multiple times, but I'm really just saying it to prove it to myself, feel good about this spot. It seems like there's going to be some kind of a baseball game or sports something or another tonight. When I was up at a pavilion earlier charging my phone, someone came by and like turned on all the field lights, and there were a lot of cars coming in too. I was just like, this is definitely not the move. So for the fourth time, I will say I feel pretty good about this spot. Hard to imagine someone coming back here for any good reason, and even if they did, I think there's a decent chance that they wouldn't see me, especially if my general theories about people's attention are even remotely correct, which is just like, if you don't move and you're generally wearing clothes that blend into whatever the environment is, it's very unlikely that you will be seen or disturbed. So that's all good. But as to the chronology, this morning I woke up at 6:55, and I woke up with a start because it sounded like someone had kind of pulled into the OHV. It was the Okie Mountain OHV trailhead or something like that, and it sounded like someone pulled into the gravel area and then like kind of skidded out real quick. And so I woke up and I was just like immediately awake, and I was just like ready to get up because 6:55, like it was light enough for me to be like, okay, I got to get out of here. And I have to say, just off the bat, initially, when I was specifically sleeping in Golden, Colorado, waiting to be on the Trex podcast, which, by the way, if you haven't heard that, I highly recommend listening to the Trex interview of me from back in September of 2025. That was the whole reason that I went out to the West Coast in general. It was just, I have done some work for the Trek over the years, both as what is called a trail correspondent, which is a contributor to a podcast that basically will select a handful of people who are doing something like the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail, and then it will send them weekly questions about their experience, and then you correspond with the host of the show. And I was a trail correspondent in 2019, and then I actually was the showrunner for that same show, Trail Correspondence, in 2023, I believe. And they had told me Zach Davis and Juliana Chauncey had told me that I kind of had a standing invitation to be interviewed on their main show, which was Backpacker Radio, at any given time. And so I biked out there with that being like my express goal. I was like, all I need is one reason to do something, and that's a good enough reason. And so biked out there, but I was pretty early. I was about 10 days early for the scheduled show, which was in late September. And so I slept behind a pit toilet for several days. I don't remember the name. Galbraith, I think is the name of it. I could be wrong. I pronounced it wrong every single time I've ever tried to say that, including multiple times on the show itself. But while I was sleeping behind that pit toilet, I did every single morning I would wake up around 5:30 because someone would show up at that trailhead to basically usually walk their dogs, and I would wake up with a start, because it was like I had to pack up all my stuff as quickly as possible. I always slept there just cowboy camped, so I would just throw my sleeping pad down and no tent, nothing like that, just my bike, my sleeping pad, and then my sleeping bag, and then I would just call it for the night. And I'd have to throw all that stuff together and pack up very quickly as soon as I heard the first close of a door, which usually, again, like it was pre-dawn, like not even like the twilight of dawn yet. It was super, super early. But I have to say, waking up like that was extremely refreshing, and it did far more for me, like cognitively, in terms of getting up and going from like that restful stage to a fully awakened stage. Than like any cup of coffee I've ever had in my life. And I gotta think that that's just like, I gotta think that the better so than even, again, the best cup of coffee I've ever had, like waking up immediately with like a shot of cortisol and a shot of adrenaline because like you think that your life is in danger is a very, very good way to wake up. It does not feel good in the moment, but like it clears the pipes so quickly. Like there's no grogginess, there's no what's the word, like negotiating with whether or not to stay in bed. It's just like you have this visceral sense that like you must get up, and it's like, again, a matter of livelihood. And so I woke up that way this morning, and I kind of miss that because it's very hard to actually manufacture that outside of like the situation that would actually call for it. And I'm sure I'll have something like that tomorrow, although as far back as I am in this little weird nook, it'll be hard for me to be disturbed by anyone because, again, there's like no reason anyone would come back here unless I've miscalculated and I'm closer to people than I think I am. But that's how I woke up. And so I had a nice little morning. I had coffee, had breakfast, packed up. I wasn't disturbed. No one was actually there. And then I got onto the road at around 8 a.m. and then walked about 1.5 miles to a gas station that was at this intersection that would take me towards a restaurant that my family is familiar with called the Blue Canoe, or my route, which took me towards Helen, Georgia. And so I went to the gas station for a bit and filled up my water bottles. There were some nice people there. A woman informed me that, like, if you are ever trying to figure out the best place to get water from a natural source, you should look for moss. And I have always heard that moss is nature's pre-filter, but she kind of confirmed to me that the presence of moss actually indicates that the water is fairly pristine, I suppose. I don't know how true it is. Like, my whole assumption, if that was correct at all, was that I would imagine if moss is like a more sensitive creature, that if the water is bad, it will not be able to grow there. So I like the idea of it being sort of a canary in a coal mine rather than something that could actually be robust when encountering something like pollutants and chemicals and stuff like that. So somewhere in between those two possibilities lies the truth, but I'm not exactly sure where. But in any case, she filled me up with some water, and then I headed further south and west. And where did I even go? Let me think. I like I said, I took a couple of breaks today. I got to another gas station at about 4 miles into the trail. So I went to a gas station at 1.5 miles, and then there was another one at 3 miles. And I was at the second gas station for a bit longer. I have to say, when I was doing the bike ride, when I was at the Amtrak station in Maricopa, Arizona, I found a charging block that was like I don't know how to describe it other than just like a high capacity, strong charging block that is able to charge my phone very, very quickly. I also have like a really good cable that can do 60 watts of charging, which, oh, I don't know exactly what that means in terms of, like ability, but I will say that like my phone basically charges like 1%, like at least every 5 minutes or so, maybe even faster than that. Which is great because I actually have not had to dip into my battery banks at all yet on this trip, and I've been away for over 48 hours now. I've managed every single time I've stopped at a place to find an electrical outlet, and while I'm doing anything else, I can allow my phone to charge, which has also been kind of interesting because I didn't bring any kind of Bluetooth headphones or anything like that. That just seemed like a very unwise choice because they'll die, and it's just another thing that I would have to charge, and so that would eat into my actual ability to use my phone, which to me is a vital thing to keep front and center in my mind. When I was doing the bike ride, I had what's called a dynamo hub, and the dynamo hub, as long as I was moving, would basically trickle charge any device that I would plug into it, and so I could get 5 or 10% of my battery from my phone charged as I was biking. And then obviously, if you're familiar with the Book of Moron, the Long Errand Chronicles, I was going to more than enough McDonald's and Starbucks to make up the difference of whatever I needed to charge. Nothing ever died when I was on the bike ride, and I would like to keep that generally going here on the hike. So I've been glad that I have this block, and I was able to utilize it. I got up to I went from 37% all the way up to nearly 70 in probably 30 minutes, which was great. And it was a nice little gas station. I bought a cup of coffee. I really didn't want to spend very much money today. I ended up spending about $16, which is, $10 more probably than I wish I had. But, it's vacation. So I am trying to be more budget conscious, but I'm also trying to make sure that I don't feel like I'm depriving myself of anything in particular. So, it's a bit of a fine balance between those two states, just because, I need to make sure that I can eat and have all the things that will make me happy. But I also want the money that I have to last as long as possible and to also be able to get home on it. So we shall see how that will all work out. But so far, so good. So yes, that second gas station at about 3.5 miles, which was early in the day. It was probably earlier than I wish it was, but it was fine enough. And then pressed on. What did I do after that? I mean, 3.5 miles is not very far. I know that there was another gas station, wasn't there? There must have been. I can hear baseball bats in the distance. I'm struggling to recall. I don't remember. Surely I stopped somewhere to have lunch at noonish, didn't I? Might have to start writing this stuff down. Surely I did. I couldn't have walked all the way from there until the last gas station. That would have been 12 miles. That seems unlikely. Man, I don't remember. Fair enough. The days are already running together and the details are hard to keep in track. Which is well enough. But yeah, I just walked a lot today, I did go to one last gas station before this park, and that's where I got my evening libation and also some sardines. I have been eating peanut butter wraps up until this point, but I feel like, and I learned this on the bike ride, but, conveniently forgot, but peanut butter makes me feel really bloated, and I can't really find a sweet spot of eating it. It seems like one wrap is generally okay. One peanut butter wrap with some nuts mixed in. But any more than that, and then I feel like I'm kind of fighting indigestion for a couple of hours. But in any case, I will say that so far this journey, what it makes me feel like is that I am encountering just enough friction and resistance to my forward momentum to where it really does feel like a challenge for me to, like, well, I can tell that I'm being challenged. Like, this is not a typical vacation, you know. Basically, I feel like this trail, this little preamble to the preamble, the preamble to the amble, it basically is just painful enough for me to be interested still to keep going. It's like, it seems like, I don't know, a sprain, or I don't know. It's hard for me to think about like what the hierarchy of injuries is, because I'm not entirely sure like what would be the escalation until something was so bad that I like literally just could not continue. But again, going back to this like sensation that I had after my last break at the last gas station, I was just like, I can tell that I am experiencing enough discomfort that would be possibly enough to dissuade someone who wasn't me from continuing to go, because it's just like, every step is uncomfortable, and that's one thing that I really actually appreciate about hiking as opposed to biking. As I mentioned earlier, it's just like biking is just so easy. It's so gentle on your body. Not always for sure, but just comparatively, it's apples and oranges. And I can tell you, I wasn't actually counting, but I felt every single footfall that I had today, and there was a certain point too where I stopped at this intersection before really heading close to where I am now, which is like just outside of Cleveland, Georgia, where I stopped because I was like, something is going on with my feet. I need to look at it and figure out if I need to do something about it. And I did do something about it, and I needed to, which was just to put some tape on some abrasions that were occurring on top of my toes, which I've had before in the past. So again, no harm, no foul, just part of playing the game. But yeah, I mean, it's like it is very painful, but not in a way that is bad. It's kind of just like proof of life, and it so much reminds me of the Book of Moron, the early clips when I was on the Pinhoti Trail. And while I wouldn't necessarily encourage anyone to listen to any of those episodes from the Book of Moron from 2022, I will say, for me personally, I'm very glad that I have that record of the experience and of just the whole, arc of that story, because I feel like the person who I am now is so different than the person who I was in 2022 approaching the Appalachian Trail. But it was necessary for me to get to the person who I am now to go through what I did, and to also express it the way that I did, which was, using a lot of cussing, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world, but I know that it's not the most charismatic way to describe. It's not the most accessible way. And, I have to give shout out to my parents, specifically my dad, for challenging me on the bike ride to not repeat that same type of description of the experience, to find sort of an elevated language to describe everything. And I really appreciate that, because initially I felt this pinch of just like, don't tell me what to do. Like, this is my project, and I like to cuss, and like, I'm just going to do it my way, and it worked before, it'll work again. But in all honesty, I'm glad that he encouraged me to take a different perspective on the matter, and to try a different style, because I think that, again, referring to accessibility, I just feel like, this is, I don't know, I guess I spent a lot of time listening to those clips initially. Like, that was a big part of my own reflection. And in 2022, one of the things that emerged from re-listening to all of those things was this concept of being accountable to my yesterday. And I always was accountable to the day before, and I would listen to like how I felt, the things that I went through, the things that I experienced, and the way that I described it. And I would either, double down on what I heard and what I was saying, or I would try to pivot it and kind of change things. And one of the most important things about blind spots is that by definition you can't see them. And that's one of the things I like most about using AI to actually analyze and kind of understand myself. It's not that I like AI exclusively for this, but I do like that it's an inexhaustible data point that I can, like pull from at any time without having to worry about like, someone else's timetable or their patience or anything like that. It's nice that I can like put something like what I'm recording right now into AI, and I can use any kind of prompt that I can imagine to try to understand any element that I want to whatever degree I want. And I don't really know where exactly I'm going with all of that, but suffice it to say that things are good. I'm excited to get to Amicalola and start the trail proper, and to also be off the pavement. It's funny because you would think that like walking on the road, while maybe not necessarily scenic or quote unquote nice compared to mountains, like the real problem with it is that you just have this like continuous repetitive impact in the exact same areas over and over and over again. And I've also hiked the Florida Trail at least for 300 miles, and that was from Key West to Okeechobee, and then transitioned from there in Okeechobee to using bikes, and also taking a train from Okeechobee to Orlando. So it was a multimodal hike that year. But the walk in Key West, from Key West all the way to Florida City, it was brutal. Just like you really, like walking with a loaded pack is really the differentiator there, because it makes it so much more taxing on your body. And I've been walking on the shoulder for the most part as of today, and for at least probably half of the day yesterday, just because my body was just like, man, this hurts. And again, I want that sweet soreness. I'm not knocking it. I'm appreciative of the pain that I have, and the blisters and the abrasions. It's real. There's no doubt about that. And they always say, and it's worth repeating, a bad day on trail is better than a good day in the office. And these have definitely been some good days on trail. So, 6:30, 40 minutes. What else? Is there anything else? I don't know. Did I make any notes? I don't really think so, but let me see. Oh, okay. Well, I can probably address both of these. I came up with this phrase that's nothing special, but I just want to say it so that it lives somewhere. But it is, you gotta go to know, which is pretty self-explanatory, but just like, for something like this, the Appalachian Trail, or for like any manner of other things, like you have to do it to understand what it is to be done, So I just thought that was kind of a cheeky way of describing it, because I like when things rhyme. So you got to go to know. And finally, the other thing that I wrote down, and it's funny too, because like when I'm out here and I am thinking about things, as I often am, there's like this bedding in process, not only physically but also intellectually, and there's a certain threshold that I cross where like I realize that some of the things that I'm thinking about are things that I should actually write down so I can talk about them later, because one of the, oh man, I don't even know how to describe it, but there is a Steven Pinker quote that comes to mind, but it's actually not on the same theme. But I'll just say it because I like the way it sounds, the Steven Pinker quote, and then I'll get back to what I'm talking about. But yeah, Steven Pinker says, quoting somebody, that nothing accounts more for the idea of the good old days like a bad memory. But yeah, like there's a period of time where I'm like realizing that like even though I'm thinking about something and kind of just being satisfied with the thought itself, I should actually write it down so that I can talk about it later, because when you're in the midst of like a thought that feels important, or some kind of like edifying thing that like makes you feel a certain way about yourself, there's a large temptation to think that you just like won't forget it, or that it's like significant enough to not need recording. But at least in my life and my experience, I think that that is not correct. I think you will basically forget everything that you ever think about. As Matthew Walker said in his podcast about sleep, forgetting is the price of remembering, and like most of what we think about during the day will be forgotten. And like memory, the whole existence of like the biological feature of memory, in my opinion, per my understanding of science, is that it doesn't exist for us to do anything more than survive. And so there's really no impetus for information to continue to exist if it doesn't have direct survival implications necessarily. There's a little bit of a fuzzy theory on my end, but suffice it to say, I will probably be writing down more and more things that I am thinking throughout the day, rather than just enjoying the thought in the moment and then letting it flitter out of existence back into the ether from whence it came. But yeah, my last thing that I'll talk about, and then I need to start preparing for the evening, is for whatever reason, I had this thought today. I was thinking about old relationships and things like that, and I had this thought that like, the words should and must, like those two words, even though must actually is a 4-letter word, I think that both of those are like words that I would like to completely excise from my vocabulary. I was talking with a friend recently who was describing some issues that they were having in their life, and I had thoughts about it, but I didn't want to use the word should or must when describing what I was thinking. And so after heavily caveating that, I was like, I'm not telling you what to do at all, but if you were to provide the situation that you have described as like a word problem, and I had to quote unquote solve it to the best of my ability and the best of my knowledge, this is what I would do based on that information. And for me, because of the kind of person that I am, like should and must are kind of dangerous words, because again, for me personally, like if I say that, or if I am in alignment with someone and they say that we should or must do something, I will do it. I will make an attempt to do it. I will try my best to address whatever has been earmarked as like something that is necessary. Ooh, I just got like a cozy feeling. I was just realizing as the sun is going down, I was like, I think this spot's going to be extra good. I think I'm going to sleep quite well over here. There has not been a single human being to come by. In early March, some place like where I am right now is like just not a spot that would be attractive to any other person. This is a Taoist spot. This is where water would settle at its lowest point, and that most men would disdain. There's nothing special about this place except for the fact that it's flat enough to put a tent down on. And I don't see any... Ooh, a big old bird. I'll take that as a good omen. Yeah, it's great. So yeah, should and must are dangerous words because as I wrote in my notes, should and must are dangerous because I will. And so, that sheer force of will, that stick-to-itiveness, that grit, like, I feel like if we knew more about the brain and were able to actually scan people and, like, be able to identify important personality traits in, like, something resembling an MRI, I feel like whatever the thing is that makes people do things, I have like an extra scoop of that, maybe. Maybe not, I'm not sure. Whatever it is, though, I mean, I know about the what is it called? The medial auxiliary. Oh man, what is it? Medial anterior cingulate cortex. That is where I have heard grit lives in the human brain, and I feel like in terms of standard deviations, I might be one or two standard deviations higher than average in that respect. I could be wrong. I have no idea. But, that was a sense that I had today, because when it comes to shoulds and musts, I will. So, take that as you will, and I certainly will. Tomorrow, I'll be headed for Dahlonega, and I plan to camp just outside of it, as I kind of am tonight in Cleveland. I don't like to camp inside of cities if I can help it, because it's just logistically nightmarish, like trying to find a place where I could be stealthy and secure. Those are usually inside of cities two contradictory points that are very difficult to unite. And so I usually like to camp on either, whatever side I am approaching the city, or just outside of the city on the opposite side. And so this evening I am, I guess, on the northeast corner of Cleveland, and I plan to sleep on the northeast corner of Dahlonega tomorrow. And then after Dahlonega, I'll be at Amicalola. And man, I can't wait for that. Like, having having sanctioned camping will be so nice. I've just spent so much time camping where I'm technically not allowed, and I think that that's a good skill. I think it's a pretty worthless skill, but even despite that fact, I think that, like, being able to reliably assess threat levels and security levels, and I'll knock on some wood here, but I biked all the way across the country. And again, probably 80% of the time I slept in places that I wasn't technically allowed, and I was never disturbed. I was never rousted. I was never arrested. I was never asked to leave at a time that was inconvenient. When I was in, what's that, Maricopa? Maybe it was, I think it was that night. Was it that night? I'm trying to think, because I think the last night maybe that I stayed on my bike ride, there was someone who came by at like 6:30 in the morning, and he told me, you can't camp here. And I was like, yeah, no worries, I'm packing up and I'm going to go. And then he came by later and he apologized, because he was just like, I don't care if you camp here, but my boss would kill me if he knew that someone was camping here. And I was like, oh, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. And then, in my mind, I was like, I already slept here. I already had a complete evening. Like, if you want me to get up at 6:30, I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, again, that was the thing that gave me that shot of adrenaline and cortisol. So I'm more than happy to call that a victory for us both. You get what you want, which is your boss doesn't give you a demerit for having a degenerate sleep in the area that you're supposed to be in control of, and then I also get what I wanted, which was, a cozy night's sleep at a rest area. And so, yeah, it's all good, my dude. And yeah, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I hope my feet get their act together, because we will be doing another day tomorrow, and come hell or high water, we'll be on the northeast corner of Dahlonega. So, this Rolling Stone must gather no moss unless we're trying to get a drink of water. So for now, I'll leave it there, because 53 minutes is insane. I can't believe I talked that much. But hey, I didn't really talk that much today in general, so this is a good little way for me to get out the Monday scaries. All right, I'm going to go eat some sardines. Love you, bye.